All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our very first round UNIV 100 roundtable for the semester. Thank you all so much for joining us today as we begin this process with our veteran instructor and teaching assistant panel. In case you all don't know whom I am, my name is Sayla Tom. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the current coordinator of transition in the Office of Orientation and Transition. So I work very closely with Tori on the TA program, the UNIV 100 program, and I do my own things with the TERT family orientation and things like that as well. It is a pleasure to meet all of you. I think this is the first time I'm probably seeing some of you all in person, so I'm very grateful to have you all here with us. We have two instructors and two TA ambassadors who were TAs in their previous time here in our office. So I want to give them a quick opportunity to introduce themselves with their name, what the populations they serve, or how long they've been teaching, or being a TA for UNIV 100. So you all can go ahead whenever you are ready.
I can go first. Hello, everyone. My name is Austin McDonald. I use he, him pronouns. In my full-time role, I serve as the Associate Director of Orientation in the Office of Student Orientation and Transition. So I work with Selah in orientation and transition, but I oversee all of the programmatic pieces for new student orientation. This is my second year teaching UNIV 100 for Freshman Connection specifically. But I have been in higher ed for about 10 years or so teaching a variety of courses over that time.
And I guess I'm the old guy here. My name is Greg Schaefer. I'm the pre-law advisor at the University of Maryland. I've been doing UNIV for longer than some of you have been alive. So I started as a TA back when I was a student, working with Jerry and the folks in orientation. And then I've been doing, even when I was out practicing law, Jerry got me to come down and do UNIV on my free time. So I think collectively it's 19 years, and it's been a couple now of where I do both FC and non-FC. So I think it's 26, 27 versions of UNIV. So hopefully we've got it figured out by now.
And then we have our lovely TA ambassador. So I'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves to you all as well.
Okay, I guess go. Hi, I'm Sega. I am a senior bioengineering major here at UMD. I was a TA in my last semester, so fall of 2023. I was a TA, and then I've been a TA ambassador since that spring, so 2024 till now. And yeah, I really loved it, and I'm excited to be here to talk about it with all of you.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia. I just buzzed out, but I'm a junior psychology major. Similar to Sega, I was a TA in fall of 2023 and then became a TA ambassador that spring. I'm super excited to be here as well. My cohort was for undecided engineering majors. So as a psych major, I definitely had some interesting experiences, but it was a great experience. I'm so glad to be back and share my experience with all of you.
All right. Thank you all so much for taking the time to introduce yourselves. For my folks who are here attending, the way that we set this panel up is we have a few questions that were pre-established before coming in, but if there are any questions that come up during this panel, please feel free to type them in the chat and I will definitely read those aloud so we can make sure we get your questions answered. Our job today is kind of giving you a little bit of insight on kind of what to expect on your journey as a UNIV 100 instructor, hopefully giving you some tips and tricks to not only be successful as an instructor, but if you have a TA this semester, also giving you a little bit of insight on how you can work well with them and develop that working relationship as well. So we're going to hop into our first question. It's going to be for our instructors, so Austin and Greg. Do you mind just briefly sharing your journey as an instructor? So both of you kind of already touched on like how long you've been an instructor with UNIV 100, but if you could talk about maybe your teaching style as well, that might be very helpful.
Austin, why don't you go ahead?
Cool, definitely. Yeah, so again, this is my second year teaching UNIV 100. So I taught it last fall, and then started again this semester. But I have taught a variety of student leadership courses over the years. I would say that my teaching style is very casual. It's laid back for the students. I definitely try to meet them where they're at. And I think the biggest piece of UNIV 100 especially is teaching them all the things that they need to know. And so they don't always know what they need to know. And so being able to be approachable and have them ask questions and have a very casual relationship is something that I definitely look for with my students.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's students are in an awkward position where you have to establish the boundaries of this is a college course. I mean, you're earning a credit for it. There is work, there are expectations, but the way we market it very often is, and I liken it to college's version of homeroom. And so it is giving students that comfort level of, I want you to be able to talk with me in a way maybe you can't talk to your biology professor in the middle of a lecture. And so over the years, I think as I've gotten a little bit older, I first took at it like I was the age of like their big brothers and sisters. And now as I've gotten a bit older, and so now there's almost there is a generation between, myself and my students, trying to kind of give that assurance, and I think Austin described it well, of a laid back, casual environment, but at the same time, trying to be a good model of expectations of what they should be doing in their other classes. And while this is not English 101, the things you need to be doing here in UNIV to be successful should be translating into your other courses. But I definitely think being approachable, being vulnerable with them, letting them know that you're there because you want to sort of guide them in this journey is I think, a critical initial connection you want to make with them. Letting them know it's not an academically intensive course, but what they are learning is extremely valuable, even if they don't really realize it at the time.
Thank you both so much for sharing your responses. We've also just had our lovely Associate Director of Transition, Tori Sage, join. So Tori, if you want to introduce yourself with UNIV 100, like your instructor side on that, we'd love to have you share.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm a little late, but thank you for coming today. My name's Tori Shea. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Associate Director of Transition in our office. So the opposite side of Austin in our office. And I have taught UNIV 100 now for, I think, 11 years. And then before that, I was even a UNIV 100 teaching assistant. So long history with UNIV 100. And now I oversee the curriculum and things like that on our end. But this was one of the favorite parts of my job is teaching UNIV 100 and getting to meet with these students and work with our teaching assistants too, who are wonderful.
Thank you, Tori. So we just went over the first question, but I would love for you to briefly share your journey with being an instructor at UNIV 100, specifically talking about like your teaching style and what has worked for you.
My teaching style. I don't know. Julia, Sega, what's my teaching style? I think I am to be honest, I think if you met me and understood how I operate in a very type A environment, as Austin shakes his head, yes. And I am not a type A type of instructor. Probably not so much on the side of the spectrum that Greg is, but in a good way. I feel like I have learned from everybody. Like I try to channel my inner Greg Schaefer, but sometimes I get the type A comes out in me a little bit. So I think I'm very like structured with like assignments and things like that. But with class, like we'll have an agenda, we'll have things to do, but like wherever the wind takes us is where we're going to go. And the reason being is because I'm not in these students' heads at the point that they are. So what I think is important to go over that day might not be what's important to them to go over that day. So often, like I start with some kind of check-in and highs and lows, and then from there, we'll like bridge off into what's going on. Like it's very easy to see through like activities like that, those highs and lows, or like a this or that, or a four corners activity, things like that, that, okay, we're really struggling with sleep right now. We're not sleeping. So let's talk about why and managing our time and things like that. So, I can't say that everything I plan out gets done in class. But I always tell my students, like, this class is what you make it. So if you have things you want to discuss, if you are open to sharing your journey and where you're at right now, that's kind of where we can go with this and make it for them, as opposed to me just like spewing information at them. Sometimes it's more helpful to see how we all relate to each other and experiences, and, oh, I'm going through that too, than it is to just be taught about different time management techniques that we might have already been taught about, or already just resources on a website. Like, we can bring those up and show them where those tools are, but let's really talk about, like, what are you actually doing? Are you using that Google Calendar like you say you use that Google Calendar? And kind of asking those questions to get them thinking. So I would say that's kind of my teaching philosophy with UNIV 100. It's supposed to be fun too. It's not a hardcore class we're not teaching Math 140 here. We're trying to make sure to support them, and in an academic environment where they still have to take things seriously and submit assignments and do quality work there. But it's also supposed to be that support and that connection. And I think I try to keep that at the center of everything.
Thank you so much for sharing. So the next question that I have is another one for our instructors. How have your experiences not only evolved over time teaching UNIV 100, but how have they impacted the way that you've kind of taught it? So, like, are there things that you've learned, kind of like lessons learned, and has that shifted the way that you all have interacted with students and things like that?
Greg, I can go first again if you want me to.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely think I originally started as trying to teach the student that I was, and the person that the resources that they need. But over time and interacting with different students in and outside of the classroom, you realize that everyone needs something a little bit different. And so being able to realize that there are different teaching styles or learning styles, and being able to meet the student where they are, I think is really important in this process, especially because this is oftentimes their first semester in UNIV 100, where they are learning what college is and the resources that they need.
I think for me, the transformation was, when I started early on, I thought I was supposed to talk at them. They had this thought that I know all this stuff they don't know. So I am this world of information, and I need to make sure they know all the information they need to know to survive the first semester. And so I was like, yada, 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 yada. Just listen to everything I say, and you're going to be fine. And I evolved now, I think, into more talking with them and having more of that open-ended dialogue and communication, and engaging them hopefully more, because each UNIV section is different. Each year is different, each cohort's different, each class can be different. So you kind of have to do a good job of reading the room and knowing, am I going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting because I've got a lot of introverts? I need to come up with different ways to get them engaged, or can I sit back and let them drive and I just make sure we don't fall off the cliff? There are other days where I'm steering, I'm on the gas pedal, I'm on the brake pedal, I'm doing it, because that classroom environment dictates it. But I think the best UNIV classes are when it is this community of students who are engaged and feel comfortable in talking about their experiences, learning from one another. And that's why the TAs, I think, are so critical, because you all are the current pulse. Like, as much as I want to pretend like I'm cool and young, I'm not cool and young. Like, I'm an old dude now, and look at the hair. So I can't relate on the same level to an 18-year-old or the 20-year-old TA. And so knowing my place and my role as the facilitator, I think has made me a better instructor, because I don't feel like they need to know everything I know to figure this Maryland thing out. They need to know everything they need to know. And that's a very different way of teaching.
I could not agree more with you, Greg. Like every year that goes on, I keep being like, wow, I am nothing. Like it's just getting, I'm not there. I'm not at that point in my life anymore. And I think the beginning of so I was a TA for UNIV100 for 2 years. And then I started, my first job was in Freshman Connection and Extended Studies. And I taught a section for Freshman Connection. So those students were only 4 years younger than me. And that was a completely different dynamic than the approach that I would take now. Then I was like so much focused on trying to like establish myself and like I'm their leader or I'm their instructor or I'm supposed to be like in front of the room and whatnot. And that it would work I think that's what I tried to do. And then that just didn't, that's not who I am. That's not my personality. That's not who I like to be. People who know me know like I'm very transparent. I'm very loyal. I'm very honest. And you will see that show up in my teaching. And I think something that I learned is the more vulnerable you can be with students about your experiences, it gives them a place to relate. So I might not be a college student now, but I do remember what it was like to be homesick and like move away from my family in New York and literally cry the first week of classes because I've never been away from my family for that long, right? And now I still live here in Maryland and my family is still in New York, and that's evolved over time. So giving them that perspective of like how things can change or how things can be, but being more vulnerable and open, even like in our TA class, like was showing everybody pictures of my niece and we were talking about experiences I've had and things like that. And that's relatable, right? So doing that right off the bat and starting that way is also a great way to build community because you're really modeling for them what you want, in return. And there are going to be some years where you're not going to get responses back. You're going to share, you're going to be vulnerable, and they might stare at you and look at you like you have 10 heads. And you have to know that like, that's okay. That's not on you. I've had years that I have been so bonded to my classes, and I have had years that like, there's not one student that I'm connected with, and it's just kind of that year. And that's okay. It's luck of the draw in that sense. And sometimes students aren't as open and vulnerable and things, but try something new. Try to get them involved. Try to have them work in pairs instead. Try to, engage them a little bit more. Or say, hey, what do you want to do today? There's definitely things. It's okay to sit in silence sometimes and like let them sit. Like maybe they are reflecting a little bit in their heads. But I think something that I've learned too is to not take those things personally. Like you are going to have great years where you are so bonded to everybody. You will also have those years that there's not one person in there that you like feel really connected to. And that's okay. As long as you are there, you are providing the support, you are providing the resources, you are really trying to build that community. You giving your best is going to rub off on someone. And sometimes even if you don't think you're connected or you're making an impact, you definitely are making an impact. It just might not be seen until a year from now when they're like, oh, I remember in UNIV when we talked about that and it meant nothing to me then, but it does now. So that's an important part too.
And that can even happen week to week. Like
Yeah.
you can have a class, whatever's going on campus, or you sense during midterms, like there's a palpable change in sort of the energy in the room. And you just, you kind of walk in every day like, okay, what am I walking into today? And, you just have to be ready. There are weeks I have something scheduled. I can tell this just ain't working. And I'm like, okay, let's go get ice cream. And we go grab, or let's go play a game on the mall for 20 minutes. And then kind of just something to break it up or get them excited, or at least throw a little change into it to where they're not feeling like, okay, everything's predictable. I'm now in this routine. It's just kind of, being willing to kind of try something new. And if it doesn't work, they don't know any better. You're just trying to, use your own style to get to them the best way.
Wow. Thank you all so much for such a well-rounded answer. And then just as a reminder for all of my lovely folks here today, if you have any questions in addition to the ones that we have kind of pre-drafted, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will be sure to read them aloud, I promise. I just want to make sure y'all feel as prepared as possible going to your first semester instructing here with UNIV100. But kind of continuing on in the meantime, both Tori and Greg, you both mentioned your TAs that you all had, and both being TAs yourself. So I definitely want to bring them into the conversation a little bit more. So Sega and Julia, do you mind just describing your experience as a UNIV 100 TA and just sharing some of the highlights and challenges throughout your first experience being one?
Yeah, I can go first. So, like I mentioned, I am a psychology major, and I was in front of a room of all engineers. At first, it was actually quite nerve-wracking because I was like, these are people that they're really, really smart, and not that I don't think I'm smart, but it's like a whole different like realm. And I think even right off the bat, I was like really honest with them, and I was like, I'm not really gonna know all the things that you're going to go through. Like we had some similarities, like we went to chemistry, so I really brought that up whenever I could. But I think it was overall it was such an amazing experience because it was good that I had like an outside perspective from them, because most of the time they're just surrounded by people that are similar to them. um so I think I was able to like bring in like an outside perspective, and I think one of the main things that I focused on doing was acting like a peer. Like I never tried to be like my instructor. I was always just trying to be myself, and also like just giving my like general experience, and telling them like it was not easy at first. Like I had an adjustment period too. Like I had exams where I was not very happy with my score, and that's okay. I also was like, I was in a room of undecided majors also. So I was like, I'm not sure I'm doing with my career path either, but I know I had these resources and I had this level of support that really helped me through it. And I'm really glad that I did that, because I feel like I was able to make those connections with my students. And I felt comfortable that they were able to like ask me questions about like what I did when I was in their shoes, or if we were to open up the floor and be like, okay, what do you guys need the most help on? Like when we had to, all the TAs, we have to like do a discussion or do like take charge of one of the classes. So I asked them, I was like, what do you guys want to learn about? Because like we had this whole structure thing before, but like, what can I help you with? And they were like, final exams, like we're so anxious. So then I made this presentation, like made it my own, and made it very much like, this is what I worked for me. It might not work for you, but these are methods that, you know, I did or some of my friends did. Um, but it was really great just to have that, and also like work with my instructor. My instructor was super open. She involved me with everything that I wanted to be involved in. I was not like a co-instructor. I was very much like, sometimes in the beginning I was, but then later on it was like, if I wanted to give more feedback, like I would be that person that like they would be like, oh, like Julia, do you have anything to add? And I'd be like, yeah, blah blah blah. So I think that was really great. But yeah, I mean the challenges was a whole new like set of a whole new environment. Also my first time TAing. Um, so like I remember I made this Jeopardy for them, which they loved, but there was like questions that were like outdated because like they got information that maybe wasn't on the website. And I was like, oh, like sorry guys, sorry about that. But it was just like being like that like familiar person to them, I think just allowed them to be more comfortable with me. So overall, like I think it was a great experience, and I think I was able to make a connection with almost all of the students in the class.
Yeah, yeah, Julia had a really good answer. Personally, I became a TA because I remember my freshman year was like super stressful. Like I was one of those kids that was like, I had a lot of like anxiety and all that stuff, and I was terrified to ask a question. That was like my number one fear. I didn't want to seem like the kid who didn't know what was going on, even in like simple things like where can I find this study resource? I'd be like, I'd rather just not know than just ask my TA a question. So like my two primary goals as a TA was one, to share as much information, like Julia was saying, about my own experiences, to make those like resources accessible for them, and also to be like a safe space for the kids that feel comfortable asking me a question, which I think is like the number one thing. Because like if we keep all of our thoughts and our worries and concerns for ourselves, especially freshman year, it kind of just builds and builds and builds until we get overwhelmed. And there's so many other things to be overwhelmed about. I don't want simple things like, hey, how should I manage out my schedule? How should I do that and that, to kind of like overwhelm them in that manner. So I actually found that like I had a really engaged class, which was a really good thing for me. They were like very willing to like share what was going on in their lives. And one of the things that me and my instructor had agreed upon initially was that I was going to lead like the icebreakers at the beginning of each of our class, just kind of like get the ball rolling, get people talking and things like that. Our class was like Thursday, kind of late in the day. So by that time of the week, kids didn't really want to didn't really want to talk that much, but so we had to kind of get it out of them a little bit. So we did, one of our favorites was like Rosebud and Thorn, and that was like a really big highlight for me. So the kids would come in and they would like, it gave them time, one, to reflect on the positive things that happened in their day, and then also have a place to kind of vent the negative things that happened in their day. Because I think a lot of the times college students come in and they're like, oh, I'm so excited for all this like things. It's like it's going to be a movie and I'm going to make a bunch of friends and things like that. So it kind of gave them a place to be like, you know what, my classes really suck this semester, or my instructor was really mean to me today, and how should I take it? How should I understand? And it gave the kids a really good they would give each other advice in a really cool way. So not only was I a peer to kind of like bounce ideas off of, but they were able to bounce ideas off of each other. And our instructor would like come in and like chime in as well. So it was a really like collaborative environment. And that was a real highlight for me, and I think for them as well. And in terms of like a challenge, I guess like Julia said, I think it can be a little bit awkward at first trying to get them to like interact with you, especially because it's like you're nervous, I'm nervous, we're all just nervous, and that can be like a very like strange environment to be in a little bit. But I guess just like make one of the things that my instructor would always tell me is that sometimes like Tori said kind of, but sometimes like it's not your fault if a kid or like the room is like silent for a day, right? Like if you say a joke and it doesn't land, it's not because you're like super unfunny. It could be like sometimes like no one's in the mood for a joke, and that's like, okay, it's okay. Like don't take that as like the kids hate you or anything like that. So that was like a learning curve for me, and I thought, yeah, overall it was a really good experience and I really liked it.
Thank you both for sharing your lovely, lovely experiences with us. And something I think Julia and Sega, you both shared was talking about like support or guidance. Do you all mind sharing what support that you found really valuable from your instructors, or what were some things that you wish that they had shared kind of like going into your first few weeks in the semester with as a TA?
You go.
Okay. I guess like one thing that my instructor was really like good at talking to me with was how like I would slowly integrate myself more and more into the class, which was really important because I came in and one of my goals was to become a better public speaker. But when I came into the TA position, there were like I would still be really nervous going up in front of the class. So she was very like open with me and like, okay, let's start with this. And then like a like during our weekly meeting, she'd be like, hey, do you want to take on a little bit more responsibility this week? Is there like some input that you want to share right now? And I'd be like, yeah, I think I feel comfortable with this specific topic. So I'll talk more during that class. And then eventually she like let me build up to like a higher or more important like role in the class. But yeah, she was very understanding about I wasn't going to be perfect the first few times I started out, and letting me know that it was okay not to be perfect the first few times I started out. And so by the end of the semester, I felt really comfortable talking to my students. They felt comfortable talking to me. And that was like a good transition, I think, for myself.
Yeah, no, and I think I like one of the most helpful things with my instructor was also like having conversations about like what my goals were, but also during like the beginning we had to do like our TA instructor agreement where we went over like what would my expectations be, like what were my goals. And I think going over that in the beginning and her being like, what are your goal, like how much do you want to be involved, how much do you want me to be involved, I think just set off like a really good relationship right off the bat. And she was like, do you want to do grading? And I was like, I don't want to do grading because that's just like, I would rather like be there as like a resource for you, or I'd rather like take on lessons that you think that like I believe that I'd give best input on. So like what we agreed to do was like she would like have like the original slides, and then before class like I would go in and edit the slides and see things that like maybe like were redundant or maybe like change the wording so it could like resonate with the students more. And I feel like it was just like it created like this really good like back and forth and just helped really benefit the students as a result. And I also was like someone saying like I also like led the icebreakers, and she kind of like let me take charge in a way to see like she like kind of acknowledged the fact that I was closer to their age and I was able to like give like that newer perspective. So I think just like that like general relationship was just really, really positive. So I think just having that going into it made me feel more comfortable in the classroom because I knew like exactly like where I stood. I know how me and my instructor Shannon, like how we could really help each other. So I think it just really added to like the overall experience of it. So yeah.
Thank you, thank you. And now I'm actually going to throw it back over to our lovely instructors who are here with us today. On the topic of teaching assistants, how did you all collaborate with them? What was that like, kind of beginning that initial process when they first reached out to you, and then even through the first weeks of the semester to develop that relationship? Well, can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, so while I haven't had UNIV100 TAs, I have had them in other courses in the past. And I think they both nailed it. You've got to encourage them. Like they are the students in your class age, like they are their peers. And so making sure that you're encouraging them, that they know what they're doing, they can relate to them, and provide their experiences, that would be helpful. And also that there's no wrong answers. And so your experience as a TA and your specific program may be a little bit different than what your UNIV 100 class is going through, but you're able to talk about your student experience, and that is definitely relating. I also, again, very casual relationship. Like I said, my teaching style would be in answering their questions when they have them, before going into the class, so that way they feel well prepared to be a leader and make sure that they are comfortable doing the topic or lesson at hand.
So, I think each TA is different, just like each classroom environment is different. And, different TAs want different things out of their experience. And so I think having that communication with what are you comfortable with? What would you like to get out of this? Because I don't need to get anything out of this. And like I've been up times, like I know what, I could run this on autopilot, but I want you to have a good experience with this as well. Like I want you to walk away feeling like not only did you help students, but you got something out of it yourself. And so I think having that communication with your TA and getting a sense of where they're comfortable. And then also I think there are plenty of times where I will defer to my TA, be like, okay, I just, talked a little bit. Tell me what's really like ears on the ground kind of thing, and making sure students recognize how valuable that the TA is, not just for the knowledge they have, but the perspective and the relatability that they have that I don't have anymore. I think is really important. So I think it's up to the instructor to make sure the class views the TA as an important part, and not just they're here to hang out and take attendance. But it is, getting them to the extent, that they're comfortable, but realizing at the end of the day, it falls on me. Like I'm the one that's sort of responsible for this. So I need to make sure things happen in a certain way, but I want to make sure that you have as much engagement as you would like to have and end up with a positive experience. And I think, Tori and y'all run such a great operation that TAs come back and do it more than once. So something must be good, and we want you to feel like this has been rewarding in some way. And I want to do it again. And I want to get more involved and connected. And it's amazing to see some folks go on to higher ed because of the experience they have TAing in UNIV, and it sparked something. And maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't, but at least if the environment in that classroom is one where they feel like I'm a meaningful addition to the class and my opinions are valued.
Yeah, I think obviously I'm biased. I run the TA program, but I just like in my teaching, like I've had FC sections where I can't have a TA, and then I've had business sections that I do have a TA, and they're a world of a difference. So if you are teaching that FC section or you don't have a TA, there are ways to still bring peer voices into your classroom. One, there are a ton of campus resources on campus that they are using their peer educators to come in and educate students about these things. All of the presentations from the health center too, and like their health and wellness promotions are usually student ambassadors coming in. So definitely take advantage of those. And then we also have, like Greg said, there are people that want to do this again and again and again. And we also want to give new students experiences too. So that's why we have our TA ambassadors like Julia and Sega are, who are coming back and kind of mentoring our new TAs. But they, as well as some of the other returning TAs, are part of this teaching assistant leadership council that will come in and actually lead a lesson in your classroom. So while they can't serve the traditional TA role for you, they can still come in and they kind of do like a question and answer type lesson where they start off with a check-in activity where they do this or that. And they're like funny prompts like, I'm enjoying the food at the dining hall. And then like letting them kind of see where they're at and break that down. Like, well, what are we enjoying about it? What are we not? Like, what are some other options to explore? Have you tried to eat here? Have you tried going here? So kind of giving those resources while checking in, but then also facilitating a brainstorming where they're writing questions down, and then they're kind of doing a Q&A type panel. So if that's something that you're interested in, bringing that peer voice in, definitely request a presentation. I put the link in the chat before, and I also will keep including it in our newsletter. So that's definitely something that I think is a great opportunity to kind of bring into your classroom, because again, our students are the heart of like what we're doing and why we do this, right? So let's just build in more support for them. We can build it at the staff level with us. We can build it at the student level with them. And it's just another opportunity for them to find someone that they connect with and resonate with on campus, which can, make this big place feel a little bit smaller.
All right. Thank you so much for these lovely responses. I just want to quickly get into some tips for success before we kind of move on to the second part of our roundtables. And so these questions are open up for both our instructors and for our TA representatives. So the first question I have for you all are, what were some tips or strategies that worked really well for you when engaging and motivating your students? You all have kind of talked a little bit about them in different aspects of your conversation, but just having something like more solidified for this question.
I think getting students out of the classroom as much as possible is great. I know, again, that was challenging. I taught one section of FC that was from like 7 to 8:45. So it was pitch black dark. So that was a little bit harder for us, but doing things like a scavenger hunt for campus resources where there were actual prizes for them, or, bringing in like kind of varying it up. Like if we have a guest speaker one week, then next week it'll be just us in kind of a like casual conversation. And then we'll try to go see a resource the next week and get out of the classroom. So trying to vary it up so it's not the same old thing every time and we're not just sitting in one space, which we know our classrooms aren't always the best for active learning and engagement strategies and things like that. So sometimes you got to make do with what you have and find like those open spaces in a lobby that you could create a circle with and do an activity. So getting out as much as possible, I think, is great. And also too, if there's a chance that like there's an event on campus or something that like, like the comedy show, and you're going to go and invite students to go with you. Like instead of going to, if you don't have class that week, you decide, you know what, we're going to go to this campus event together. Any opportunities like that, I also think are great. Dots is offering a like ride along like type thing where you can like go on the bus and like they'll take you down to like the Riverdale Park area by Whole Foods and things like that, and show students how to ride a bus and what to expect from it, which like thinking back, I'm like, oh, do students need to know how to ride a bus? And I was like, I was terrified to get on that bus the first time. I didn't know if I needed an ID card. Do I have to pull the little thing to tell it to stop? Like that's who I was as a person. So if I did that with a big group, it would be much easier for me. My anxiety would calm down a little bit. So that would be my suggestion, is to get out and have some fun with it too.
I would say that my biggest thing is be yourself. So it can be very nerve-wracking to be in front of the class, especially as an instructor that may not be their age anymore. But you have to rely on your experiences that have gotten you here to be able to teach this course. Like you are qualified to teach it for a reason. That's why you were asked. And so rely on who you are and the experience that you bring to be able to share that with the next generation of student leaders.
Also, this is kind of like in terms of motivating your students. It might seem a little silly, but I found like as a student and as a TA, like little things like pieces of candy or like stickers like goes a long way for your students. I remember like my instructor would like bring in like a pack of stickers and I still have them on my laptop today. And they're like a little boost of encouragement because a little bit of validation or a little bit of something to bring a smile on your student's face is going to go a long way. And they'll like remember it and be like, oh, my instructor or my TA gave me this and it was really lovely. And they like care about me. So little things like that go a long way as well.
Oh. Well, thank you all so much. I think these are some excellent resources. Julie, if you wanted to share, please feel free. Go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I think everyone's kind of touched on this, but being as receptive as possible to your student population is huge. Seeing like even the first week, seeing what works for them and what doesn't work for them, whether it be like icebreakers or like how to best like get them involved. If they work best in groups, like kind of go with that. So push out of their comfort zone. But I think just making the environment as comfortable as possible for them will just make them more comfortable with like the instructor in the class and make them more likely to like be involved. So I think just being as open and being as flexible as you can is going to be great.
Thank you. I think that was a great addition. So I'm really happy that you did share that. That environment is such a big piece. Like if y'all know me, y'all know I love to set a good mood, a good vibe for the class. And it really does set kind of like the expectation and the mood going forward in the class. And I think the last question that I kind of do want to hit on, I think there's a few more pieces of information when to get out, but I think it's really important, especially in the fall semester. How do you all approach bringing in discussions about like major events or major occurrences happening on campus or in the world? Like, were there strategies that you use to have these? Because a lot of times they come up unexpectedly sometimes and they're not planned into the syllabus. So for my TAs, like what was that like hearing about things on campus? And like, how did you all try and bring that into the classroom if that happened, like talking with your instructors? And then for the instructors, talking about like what it was like hearing it like for you all and then bringing that into the classroom. So either perspective would be great to hear.
So the way I do it is, I make announcements at the beginning of class in terms of like, big events that are going on around campus, things they should be aware of, whether it's a sporting event or, something I'm aware of, a presentation, a lecture, something. And then at the end, when I do like roses and buds, which are roses are cool things that are happening, buds are things in the near future. I will encourage them to share things they're doing on campus. So they find out from their classmates, hey, this club sounds pretty cool, or club volleyball is having tryouts, or this, organizations, and they learn from each other. The awkward thing or the challenging thing is, when you brought it up, is like when things happen in the world, like what role do I or we have to sort of focus on things that happen in the world? And I've been through a couple, some big things that have happened in the world while I've been teaching. And so how much do you bring the real world into that classroom? I think it's certainly up to the instructor, but I think it's important to realize that we think College Park's a bubble. It's not. Like they're aware of what's going on out there. And when there's political unrest or there's, a national tragedy or just things are happening that need to be acknowledged, to not ignore them or pretend like they don't exist, but recognize that all is playing into what the students are going through. And maybe talking a little bit about and being ready to pivot a little bit. If something crazy is happening out in the world, and we all know the elephant's in the room, let's, talk about the elephant together versus, letting you try to sort it out on your own. So it kind of goes back to that whole being adaptable and reading what's going on and knowing you need to change things to incorporate that.
I also think it's so important to be flexible on days that a lot is going on or weeks that a lot of things are going on in the world. two things came to mind instantly for me. One was in 2018 when I was teaching UNIV 100, or no, it was 2017, the fall of 2017. Second Lieutenant Richard Collins was murdered on our campus in May before that. And these first year students came in and they were hearing a lot about it because it happened so close to finals that nothing was really done towards the end of the semester. But in the fall, they had planned all of these like memorials and things like that were going on. And I remember like looking at them, I'm like, do you all know what happened? And they were like, no, like everyone's talking about this, but we have no idea what happened and what, like, how to feel about it or what to do about it. So everything, again, that was one of those days that it all went out the window and we started looking up information online together. And we taught each other about it, of what we found and information, and debriefed resources and things like that, and how, steps the university was taking to move forward. And sometimes that meant like criticizing steps that the university was taking too, like acknowledging that not all students agreed with how things were going, and that's okay to not agree with those things. So like that was a pretty significant event that had happened that we really needed to take the time. And then I will never forget when the 2020 election.
I was about to say, Tori, be ready, y'all, because
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of anxiety and a lot of interest and a lot of confusion, and just be ready. And I'm sure Tori's about to talk about it, but this is an election year, y'all. So people are going to be, they've got some vested interests, and it may affect their moods, it may affect their attitudes, so be ready. But I'm sure Tori's got more to say.
Well, no, and actually, I guess it wasn't the 2020. When did Trump got elected in 2018?
No, that would have been 16.
16. I'm bad with numbers. I can't do simple math, not my strong suit. So when that happened, it was a Tuesday, and it was actually the day after. It was a Wednesday, and I had UNIV 100. And I wasn't feeling great about what was going on. And I figured that a lot of my students also weren't feeling great, so I canceled class. And it was the biggest mistake that I had made. And I thought I was giving everybody a time off or like to think about it, but I offended certain students because, I think a lot of them assumed that had this election gone a different way, I probably wouldn't have canceled class. So there was that. And then there was also the component of like students actually had reached out and been like, hey, I would have loved to like be with you today. So that is something that I think like I never, and again, it was just like a spur of the moment. Like I felt like everybody could use a mental health day and a break. And I didn't realize, one, the value of people being together in a situation like that, but two, also how that could possibly like the alternative. Like if this did go the other way, would I have canceled class? Probably not, to be completely honest with you. So I learned my lesson from that, and like definitely it was a growing opportunity for me. And that's part of this too, is that like you're gonna learn, and that was years into, by that point I had been teaching UNIV since 2013. So that was like, a good time in. Like I would say it wasn't my first go around or anything like that, but you constantly are learning from those things, and take advantage of all of these resources that the university is pushing out about like freedom of speech and all of that too, and learn about that, because those are delicate situations to handle in class that might make us feel uncomfortable as instructors. But I do think we need to be there for our students and support them, and making sure that they understand what their resources are too. So finding their communities that they can talk about these things, and find like-minded individuals like themselves to have that space.
I don't want to continue if anyone else has anything to share, but Tori and Greg, thank you both very much. I think you both hit the nail on the head of what I was trying to get across for instructors. So I really appreciate you all being open and honest about your experiences. If we have time for like Tori, I know you had some stuff that you wanted to cover beforehand.
You're okay.
I think I just want to ask one last question, and all of you all can answer this. Just reflecting on your past experiences, either as a TA or as an instructor, what is like one thing that you like wish you had been told before going into your first semester? Like something that you wish that the transition team would have told you, or something that another instructor wished they would have mentioned before, to kind of help you feel either a little bit more confident or a little bit more secure in like going into the semester as an instructor.
You don't have to have all the answers. It's okay. There are so many people to support you. Like, even like the number of times that I called on my letters and sciences folks to be like, you've done this, Greg, what do I do for this? Or Tom, what do I do for this? Like, there are so many people who have taught this course before you, who have been there. You're not alone. You are alone in the classroom teaching. That's difficult, right? Like it feels like you're in a bubble sometimes. But you're not. You have community. You have other people that teach this course. That's what my team is here to do, to help you through that as well. But that it's a growing experience for you. Students will think you have all the answers because you are that person in front of the room, and it is perfectly okay to model for them how to find resources and how to advocate for yourself. So saying, I'm actually not sure, like, let's look that up. Let's see if I can find, we can't find the information online. Let me go back to my office. I have someone I can email, and I'll let you know, and I'll follow up after. That's perfectly okay. And I think that was something that I had to learn, because I like having all the answers, but I did not have all the answers. I still don't have all the answers.
I think the biggest thing is that it's gonna be okay. So you could have this specific plan of what you plan on doing that day, and it can be very nerve-wracking to make sure that you hit all of those pieces. But take a deep breath as you go into each class, and know that no matter where the conversation goes, it's gonna be okay, and your students are gonna be better for being in your class and being with you.
I would say pretty much something everybody's kind of touched on, but just like don't like be prepared to kind of wait to foster the environment. Like the environment that you really want to see in your classroom might take a little bit of time to get there. Like that easy conversation, that like sharing of ideas, that might not be the first day, but maybe it's like the first month, and then you see it and it keeps like continuing to grow. So allow it to grow. Yeah, I also have to log off, but it's been really great talking to all of you guys, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Sega. Have a great one. Um, Julia or Greg, did you have anything you wanted to add real quick?
I was just going to say that, it's really important work that we do, and enjoy it along the way. The relationships, the connections, the difference you make in these students' lives is important. And sometimes you get the feedback where like, thank you, Mr. Schaefer, thank you, Greg. And like, you're like, oh, look at me, I'm great. And there are other times you don't. And you're like, I wonder if I did anything. You did. You helped them. They may not realize it. They may not verbalize it. They may not be aware of it at the time. But the work that we do in UNIV, I think, is really important to our students and their development and their time at College Park. And the work that we do is, I think, appreciated by our students, even if you don't get the daily affirmation. You don't get that sort of pat on the back, or Tori doesn't come down with, some treats for me to say, Greg, you're a great instructor, which maybe you could, Tori. But even if you don't, I still realize at the end of the day, and we said at the outset, the work we do in UNIV is one of the, I think, the most worthwhile and beneficial things I do in school year.
Yeah, and I think other people have brought up this point also, but I think that like being as like true to your experience as possible, and realizing that you bring a very valuable voice, is something that's, I think, really important to keep in mind. Something that you don't even think, like something like little that you did, or some like even like mentioning like how you were anxious, or like how you were homesick, or just like, or what worked for you, what didn't. Thinking that something that could be like really small could actually like be really significant for someone. And I think just like knowing that like your experience is going to be very helpful. It's just learning more about people around you is just going to be so beneficial. So I think just being as open as possible to your students is just going to go a long way.
Wow, thank y'all so very much. I think y'all just gave some excellent feedback, and hopefully our instructors really do take some of this to heart. Tori, we did have a question in the chat that I did want to ask you. Just going back to the question we had before this, there was a question about the larger political debate that might potentially break out in the classroom. So some of our instructors are a little bit concerned about facilitating a conversation around that. They were wondering if there's going to be any training opportunities for UNIV 100 instructors prior to the election to discuss how to facilitate a conversation around this.
Yes, I love that question. And this is the type of feedback I would love to get all the time. So please, anyone, if you have any feedback on things that you would like to see, we want to give you programming and training and development that you want to see and would be helpful to you. So please always send that our way, transitionprograms@umg.edu. This is super important. So in October, we were going to facilitate a conversation on kind of like discussing mental health in the classroom and how that can even be a tough conversations, but maybe we'll make October a tough conversations month and, bridge in our mental health resources with our mental health awareness week happening in October. But also this political environment and the atmosphere that creates and what's going on in the world, our country, that could spark a lot of mental health issues too. So maybe, also talking about how to have those tough conversations politically or, with what's going on in the world with protesting and, everything like that. Maybe we'll just make that tough conversations month and also have something a little bit geared more towards around political discussions and debates, but also, current events that are happening in the world and students feeling different ways about them. So we will try to put that together in October for you all. As September will be focused around advising, but also we have our step up training. So we'll add one more to the docket for October. But if there's other feedback that you all have, please do send it our way.
I will say that's one of the downsides of creating such a warm, welcoming, and open environment that sometimes now they feel like they can talk about these things. And while we don't want to sort of squash the conversation, we also need to realize, we are in an academic community, and while there is freedom, we also want to be mindful of triggering conversations. And the last thing I want is a confrontational classroom. And I think there maybe is a better place for those conversations than UNIV, but letting students know, maybe we could talk about this one-on-one, or maybe we could, find a different venue where you can get your thoughts out without offending everybody else in the room. There's teachable moments to be had there as well. So I've had to sort of, cut some of those off going, okay, I think we've gone a little too far. Mm-hmm. Here's an alternative to where we can still continue that conversation, but in a more respectful kind of way. That's one of the downsides of creating that warm, welcoming environment is people sometimes feel like they can say what they want, and there's a time and place for everything.
Thank you all. Yeah, I feel like I'm 30 and I have such a hard time with those conversations. So knowing that these are our incoming freshmen, that's a big conversational topic. That's they may not, they don't necessarily know what they're going to believe for the rest of their lives either. Right. I don't know what I'm going to believe for the rest of my life. So that's such a big conversation. And so it makes me very nervous, but I don't want to quash conversations. I think that's important. But Tori, I actually really, really appreciate what you said about not canceling class, because I think my first response, if there was a certain outcome, would be, okay, I'm not in a mindset, right. But that's not necessarily fair to any of the students, like right. You said. So I actually really appreciated that because I wouldn't have thought of that necessarily.
Yeah, and I didn't either. And like that's what these communities are for. And I think that's the other thing too, is like thinking about, what Greg said of like what community you want to create in UNIV 100. And we never want that to turn hostile, or we never want that to turn, too heated. So sometimes it is best to redirect those conversations if they get that way. But there's also definitely opportunities and spaces. The other thing that I saw too around the political like side of things is students going home to their families who might have differing political beliefs, especially around Thanksgiving. So after the election, them going home and them coming back feeling a little like either discouraged by what they were met with at home or what they had. So sometimes I've seen that come up too, in a way like that, which honestly made me think like maybe we should collaborate with the Office of Family Engagement in this and like, you know, like also kind of do some programming for family members in that way. So I'm glad we are having these conversations because it's even sparking some opportunities in my brain.
All right. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us today. This basically wraps up all of the questions that we had kind of pre-established and from our lovely group of individuals attending today. If you do have any additional questions after we finish this recording, please feel free to send that over to transitionprograms@umd.edu. We check that email religiously every single day to make sure that we're on top of everything. But I don't want to hold anybody any longer than we kind of already had. I know it's supposed to end at 1 o'clock today. But you all should be able to get this recording. This will be available for all UNIV 100 instructors. I believe it will be sent out in the newsletter, perhaps. Yes, so it will be sent out in the newsletter. So if anyone would like to watch this back, or if any new questions do arrive or ideas that come up out of this, please feel free to let us know. Our job, like I said, is to make sure your transition is as seamless as possible into the UNIV 100 instructor experience. But thank you all so much for being here with us today. Thank you to our lovely panel of individuals. I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend and a great rest of your semester. We will see you all soon for our next roundtable.
Thank you all.
Bye, y'all.
Thank
Go
you.
Terps.
Thank you.